A piece of Oklahoma history goes up in flames, and now a fire that happened 2 years ago reveals troubling information about one of the state's top public safety agencies.
Fox 25's Phil Cross tells us why this fire has left a family with few answers and a community in limbo.
Guys, it was a hotel built by the founding father of Seminole, and for the last 14 years, it was the home of Ralph and Cynthia Arrington. But 2 years ago, during their first trip away in nearly a decade, it caught fire. Before April 23, 2011, this building was a home to Ralph and Cynthia Arrington and their many businesses. Now it's a shell. Remnants of the vintage bowling alley and online auto parts companies reside inside the burned out walls of the historic Grisso Hotel.
Everything we owned was in this building.
The Arringtons came home from an Easter trip in 2011 to find their lifetime of collections and belongings destroyed.
Set the fire right over there where that big hole is. That's where it started.
Ralph Arrington says a fire investigator told him the crater in the concrete floor was the likely origin of the fire. But they say getting that information did not come easily.
Nobody will give us any. They've all been lying to us and handling us.
To understand the Arringtons' frustrations, you have to go back to the beginning.
We had heavy black smoke coming from all areas of the building.
Seminole Fire Chief Bryant Baker responded to the fire, but he says he did not conduct an investigation.
We contacted the state of Oklahoma, the fire marshal, and anytime that we have a large loss of life, a large monetary value loss, or we have a large historical building, that's out of our reach, out of our grasp.
The state fire marshal's office did send an investigator, but according to this report, he did not enter the building, calling it unsafe.
What he told us is that, well, we'll wait for a few days for that hot spot to cool down because I don't want to fall through it. And I said, well, Mark, I said, there's concrete under there. You're not going to fall through it. It's not a wood floor. Well, I'll come back in a few days, and he never came back.
Ralph says the investigator eventually told him he was free to begin cleaning up.
I cleaned this whole out this whole thing was cleaned by me and shovel. That's how I found all that.
The all that Ralph's referring to were puddles he says showed rainbows and a strong smell of diesel.
The fuel was just dripping out of that thing right there.
The Arringtons say they called to get the fire marshal agent to return, but they say he never did.
I don't want to ruin the investigation. Well, how are you going to ruin something that isn't even happening?
The initial report said the cause of the fire could not be determined, but that did not deter the Arringtons. A year later, this internal memo from the state fire marshal's office proved what the Arringtons said they already knew. The investigator did not do a complete investigation, and it failed to meet state guidelines.
I sat down personally with them, and the report was less than desirable for our standards on that one.
Now, that incomplete investigation forced the fire marshal's office to start all over with a new investigator trying to piece together a fire that had already been cleaned up and witnesses who provided inconsistent statements. Now, up front at 9:30 tonight, the state fire marshal will tell us what went wrong with the initial investigation and why they now have a person of interest. Reporting in the studio, Phil Cross, Fox 25 News.
Up front at 9:30, a massive fire, an incomplete state investigation, and a family trapped in the middle.
Fox 25's Phil Cross takes us back to Seminole, where one family says an arsonist is free because of failures in the system. Phil.
The fire happened more than 2.5 years ago. Now, earlier we heard from the state fire marshal about the initial investigation that failed to meet the most basic standards. But was it an accident or arson? And why, with multiple agencies involved, do we still not know the answers in this fire investigation?
I'm still feeling it 2 years later. I mean, look at the place. You know, we lost everything. You know, no one wants to help. No one knows nothing.
Ralph and Cynthia Arrington claim the investigation into the fire that destroyed their home has been passed around due to their past problems with the city. In a fire marshal's report obtained by Fox 25, a former supervisor says the investigation was requested because, quote, it was another one of those things, meaning it is quite political. The city denies politics played any part.
The state fire marshal's office was not called in because of the Arringtons.
Fire Chief Bryant Baker says the department's policy is to request a state investigator for major losses and fires in historic buildings.
It was a great loss for the city of Seminole.
Is there a conspiracy in Seminole to cover up an arson?
There is not. Can't add much to that.
Ed Lemmings is the Director of Emergency Services for Seminole. He admits the city and the Arringtons haven't always agreed, especially when it comes to the city's urban renewal plan, which includes the Arringtons' home, the old Grisso Hotel.
Certainly it's in our urban renewal area, but almost the entire city is in our urban renewal area.
The Arringtons say they've been told the burned out building is a hazard and is now being considered for acquisition under the city's urban renewal plan. But they say this document they got from the city shows their property was inventoried as a target a year before the fire.
We're always ready to work with our citizens, especially to try and keep these old buildings. The problem that we're having is we can't get a plan out of them. We have to have some kind of a plan. We can't let it stand there and deteriorate, finish falling down.
The only thing fit for this town's fit for is warehousing.
The Arringtons say their plan to rebuild was put on hold. They say they want a proper state investigation first.
I have no idea on why that report was not more in-depth than what we think it should be.
State Fire Marshal Robert Doak says he's not sure how an inadequate investigation slipped through the cracks while a family's life and livelihood hung in the balance.
It looks towards what we may want to consider suspicious, according to the Arringtons, that some of the information that they had told me several months back, that they assumed that it was suspicious. Now, there was nothing to actually state that it was, but at this time we're looking at it, it could be a suspicious. We're not saying that it's accidental.
The state's fire marshal's office has put a new 3-stage review process in place for all future investigations, and a new investigator is working the Grisso Hotel fire. They've now identified a person of interest, and Doak wants to assure taxpayers they are getting what they're paying for.
They deserve a quality service from our agency. My desire is to provide that, and I hope that this never comes to light again, less than a desirable report.
Now, at this time, the fire marshal's office isn't revealing the identity of that person of interest. They say the Arringtons' case is still open, and they're hoping more media attention will bring about more tips to help solve it. In the meantime, the Arringtons say they will continue to fight for justice as they work to put their lives back together, and we're going to continue to look into this case and all the complications facing the city, state, and the Arringtons. Reporting in the studio, Phil Cross, Fox 25 News.